The warning lights flashed red across the small ship's control panel, pressed her thin, pale hands against the smooth surface, trying to make sense of the alien symbols that meant danger. Her large, dark eyes reflected the angry glow of the emergency systems as they blinked faster and faster. "No, no, no," she whispered in her musical voice. The words came out like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but fear made them shake. The engine core had failed completely. Not just damaged or running poorly, it was dead. The massive explosion 3 hours ago had torn through the ship's heart, leaving twisted metal and broken dreams in its wake. Now her research vessel drifted helplessly in the cold emptiness between the stars. Was young for her people, only 25 cycles old. They lived much longer than most species, but she had barely reached adulthood when the Council chose her for this mission. She was supposed to study the young stars in this region, to watch new suns being born from clouds of gas and dust. It was important work that could help her people find new homes among the stars. But now she would die here, alone and afraid. She moved carefully through the damaged ship, her movements graceful despite the fear. They were built like dancers, tall and thin, with long limbs and delicate features. Their skin was pale blue-white, almost like moonlight, and their hair fell in silver waves. They were beautiful but fragile, more like living art than the tough survivors that filled most of the galaxy. The life support system showed 26 hours of air remaining, maybe 30 if she stayed very still and tried not to breathe too much. The food makers had stopped working when the engine died. The water recyclers were failing too, making strange grinding noises that meant they would not last much longer. Had sent out a distress signal, but she knew it was probably useless. This was the edge of human space. Her people had taught her about humans since she was a small child. They were monsters from the dark between stars, creatures of violence and hunger who knew only how to destroy. The stories were all the same. Humans were predators who had fought endless wars on their home world until they finally won by killing everything else. Then they had turned their terrible weapons toward the stars, conquering world after world. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they could not use. Other species either served them or died. The worst part was how they looked. Humans appeared almost normal from a distance: 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head like many intelligent species. But up close you could see the truth. Their eyes faced forward like hunters tracking prey. Their teeth were sharp for tearing meat. Their thick, heavy bodies were built for fighting and killing. Some stories said that humans could not even speak properly. They made harsh, ugly sounds instead of the musical languages that civilized people used. Others claimed they could copy other languages perfectly, which made them even more dangerous because they could trick you before they attacked. Had never seen a human herself, but she had studied the reports from others who had encountered them. The few who survived always came back changed, speaking in whispers about the terrible things they had witnessed. Ships torn apart by human weapons, cities burned to ash, entire populations sold into slavery or worse. Her people had decided long ago to avoid human space completely. There were scientists and artists, not warriors. They had no weapons that could stand against human fleets, no armies to defend their beautiful crystal cities. Their only protection was distance and hope that the humans would never notice them. But now was here, in their territory, broadcasting her location to anyone who might be listening. She checked her equipment again, running through the same hopeless routine she had performed every hour since the accident. The memory crystals containing her research were still safe in their protective case. 5 years of work studying how new stars formed, all stored in devices no bigger than her thumb. If she died here, at least the crystals might survive. Maybe someone would find them someday and learn something useful. The distress beacon kept sending its signal into the dark. Standard emergency protocol called for broadcasting on all known frequencies, including the ones that humans used. She had thought about shutting it off, but that would only make her death come faster. At least this way, She might live long enough to see her killers before they finished her. Returned to the main cabin and sat in her chair, pulling her knees up to her chest. The ship felt colder now, though she knew that was probably just her imagination. Fear had a way of making everything seem worse. She closed her eyes and tried to remember home. The crystal spires of the capital city, reaching toward the sky like frozen music. The gardens where she had played as a child, filled with flowers that glowed soft blue in the moonlight. Her family's laboratory where she had first learned to love the stars. Her mother had been so proud when the council chose for this mission. "You will help our people reach the stars safely," she had said, her voice full of joy. "You will be remembered forever as one who built the future." Now would be remembered as one who died stupidly, alone and far from home. The ship's sensors made a soft chiming sound. She opened her eyes and looked at the display. Something was coming toward her through the darkness, something big and fast, moving with purpose rather than just drifting. Her heart began to race as she read the sensor data. The approaching ship was definitely human design, blocky and crude-looking, built for function rather than beauty. It was still too far away to see clearly, but it would be here soon. Touched the memory crystals one last time, then sat back in her chair to wait. She had always wondered how she would die. Now she knew. She only hoped it would be quick. Captain Maya stood in front of the main screen on her ship's bridge, studying the weak signal that had caught their attention. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes showed the kind of focus that came from years of making life-or-death decisions in space. "How far out are they, Jin?" she asked her navigation officer. "About 2 hours at current speed, Captain," Jin replied. He was a small man with quick hands and a steady voice. "The signal is definitely a distress call, but it's using some kind of pattern I've never seen before." Maya nodded slowly. The Second Chances was officially listed as a salvage vessel, which was true enough. They did collect abandoned ships and broken equipment, but that was only part of what they did out here on the edge of human space. "Any idea what species we're dealing with?" Maya asked. Dr. Sarah looked up from her scanner readout. She was the ship's medical officer, but she also knew more about alien biology than anyone else in the fleet. "The transmission frequency suggests origin, Captain. If I'm right, this could be our first direct contact with their people." Maya had heard the name before, but she could not remember much about them. "Remind me." "They're scientists and artists from the inner spiral arm," Doctor explained. "Very advanced mathematically, but physically fragile. They've been avoiding contact with most other species for decades. If this really is one of their ships, they're a very long way from home." Maya felt that familiar tightness in her chest that came when someone was in trouble. It did not matter what species they were or why they were out here. Someone needed help, and her ship was the only one close enough to provide it. "Change course to intercept," she ordered, "and power up the medical bay. If they're as fragile as Doctor says, they might need immediate care." "Captain," said her security chief, a large man named, "we don't know anything about these aliens. They might be dangerous." Maya turned to look at him. Was a good man and a loyal friend, but he sometimes forgot that the Second Chances was not a military vessel. They're sending a distress signal. That usually means they're dying, not planning an attack. "Still think we should be careful, ma'am." "We're always careful," Maya said with a small smile. "But we're also always helpful. That's why we're out here." The Second Chances was not a beautiful ship. It looked like exactly what it was, a working vessel built to do difficult jobs in dangerous places. The hull was thick and from countless missions. The cargo bays were large enough to carry entire populations if necessary. Every system was built to be reliable rather than elegant. As they got closer to the alien ship, Doctor spent her time preparing for whatever they might find. She had medical files on dozens of species, including the limited information available about biology. Their blood used a different kind of oxygen carrier than humans, and their nervous systems were much more sensitive to certain chemicals. "I'm setting up a clean room environment," she told Maya over the communication system. "If this really is we'll need to be very careful about contamination. Their immune systems might not be able to handle our bacteria." Maya appreciated how Doctor always thought ahead. The woman had saved more lives than anyone else on the ship, often by preparing for problems before they happened. When they finally reached the vessel, Maya could see that it was in serious trouble. The engine section showed signs of a major explosion, and the hull was cracked in several places. Emergency lights flickered weakly through the few windows that still had power. "Life signs?" Maya asked. "One," Doctor reported. "Very weak. Whoever is in there doesn't have much time left." "Right then, prep the airlock. Doctor, get your medical team ready. Jin, bring us alongside nice and gentle." The rescue operation took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Maya led the team herself, wearing a full environmental suit to protect both herself and whoever they might find inside the alien ship. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, revealing corridors that seemed too delicate for space travel. They found in what looked like the main cabin, unconscious and barely breathing. Maya had seen pictures of their species before, but seeing one in person was different. The alien was even more fragile-looking than she had expected, tall and thin like a dancer, with pale blue-white skin and silver hair that seemed to glow in the emergency lighting. "She's beautiful," whispered one of Maya's crew members. "She's dying," Doctor said firmly. "Let's get her to medical right now." Moving the unconscious alien was like handling a piece of delicate art. They used a special stretcher designed for fragile species, with extra padding and gentle restraints. Maya noticed that the alien's hands were clutched around a small case, holding it close to her body even while unconscious. "Should we take that away?" asked. "No," Maya said. "If it's important enough for her to hold onto while dying, we let her keep it." Back on the second chances, Doctor worked quickly to stabilize their unexpected patient. The medical bay had been designed to handle many different species, with adjustable gravity, atmosphere, and lighting. Within minutes, she had the breathing properly again and hooked up to monitors that showed her vital signs. "She's going to be okay," Doctor announced. "Severe oxygen deprivation, dehydration, and exhaustion, but nothing permanent. She should wake up in a few hours." Maya sat in a chair next to the medical bed, watching the alien sleep. The woman looked so young and peaceful, nothing like the dangerous unknown that had worried about. Her silver hair had been cleaned and arranged carefully by Doctor, and her breathing was steady now. "What do you think she was doing out here?" Doctor asked quietly. Maya looked at the small case that the alien still held in her hands. "Maybe we'll find out when she wakes up." When her eyes finally opened, the first thing she saw was soft, warm light that did not hurt to look at. The second thing was gentle music playing somewhere nearby, not music, but something pleasant and soothing. The third thing was a strange face looking down at her with obvious concern. The face belonged to a human woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Tried to scream, but her throat was too dry to make any sound. Had been awake for 3 days, and she still could not understand what was happening to her. Every time she expected pain or death, the humans gave her comfort instead. Every time she prepared for cruelty, they showed her kindness. Doctor visited her every few hours, always speaking in gentle tones and making sure she was comfortable. The woman had somehow learned enough about biology to create the perfect food mixture for her species. The medical bay was kept at exactly the right temperature, with lighting that felt like home. But it was Captain who confused her the most. The human woman came to visit every day, not to question her or demand information, but simply to talk. She asked about her recovery, whether she needed anything, and if she would like to see more of the ship. "Why are you being kind to me?" finally asked on the 4th day. She had learned that humans could indeed speak properly. Captain spoke her language with only a slight accent. Maya smiled and sat down in the chair beside the medical bed. Why wouldn't we be kind to you? Because you are human, said, as if that explained everything. And what do you think that means? Looked at her carefully. Captain did not look like a monster. Her eyes were forward-facing like a hunter, yes, but they were warm and intelligent. Her teeth were indeed sharp, but she used them for smiling. Her body was thick and strong, but she moved gently, as if she was afraid of breaking something delicate. I think there are many things your people have not told you about humans, Maya said softly. Would you like to see the truth for yourself? An hour later, found herself walking slowly through the corridors of the human ship. Doctor had insisted she use a floating chair for support, but Captain walked beside her, pointing out different areas and explaining what they did. This is engineering, Maya said as they passed a room filled with humming machinery. Our chief engineer is unnamed. His people are excellent with mechanical systems. Looked through the window and saw a large, insect-like being working carefully on some kind of device. The noticed her watching and waved one of his 4 arms in greeting. She had heard of them before. They were supposed to be slaves of the humans, forced to maintain their war machines. But this one looked happy and well-fed. He was even wearing what looked like a uniform with rank insignia on it. Is not your slave? Asked. Slave? Maya looked shocked by the idea. Of course not. Is our chief engineer. He's probably the 3rd most important person on this ship after Doctor and myself. They continued through the ship and saw more things that did not match what her people had taught her. The crew was made up of several different species, all working together. A small group of blue-scaled operated the ship's sensors. 2 reptilian Saxons handled communications. Even the security team included non-humans. None of them looked like prisoners or slaves. They wore the same uniforms as the human crew members, shared the same living spaces, and seemed to be treated with the same respect. I do not understand, said finally. Where are your armies? Where are your weapons? We have some defensive systems, Maya admitted. But this isn't a warship. Come on, let me show you the heart of what we really do out here. Maya led her to a set of large doors that opened with a soft whisper. Beyond them was the most beautiful space had ever seen outside of her home world. It was a garden that stretched further than seemed possible inside a ship. Plants from dozens of worlds grew in carefully maintained sections, each area designed to provide the perfect environment for its inhabitants. The air was warm and humid, filled with the scent of growing things and the soft sound of moving water. Welcome to our hydroponics bay, Maya said, though we prefer to call it the Garden of Memories. Moved forward slowly, her eyes wide with wonder. She could see earth plants growing alongside exotic flowers from worlds she had only heard about in stories. Tall trees with silver bark stretched toward artificial suns. Vines with glowing fruit hung from carefully arranged supports. How is this possible? She whispered. We collect seeds and samples whenever we find abandoned ships or empty colonies, Maya explained. Sometimes entire species go extinct, but their plants can still survive if someone cares for them properly. We keep these gardens so that future generations can still see the beauty their ancestors created. They walked deeper into the garden and began to recognize some of the plants. There were crystal flowers their petals chiming softly in an artificial breeze. A section of red sand contained the spiky desert plants that the Saxon people considered sacred. And then Maya led her to a corner where soft blue light filtered through the leaves of plants that made her heart stop. Night blooms, she breathed. Those are night blooms from Mai. The flowers were exactly as she remembered from her childhood, delicate petals that glowed with gentle blue light, arranged in spirals that seemed to contain mathematical perfection. The scent was like music made solid, bringing back memories of home so strong they made her eyes water. How do you have these? She asked, My people never gave seeds to humans. Maya knelt down beside one of the plants, her expression sad. We found them growing wild on a small research station that had been abandoned for years. The automatic systems were still working, but everyone was gone. We think they left in a hurry when something threatened them. The Nexus station said quietly. We lost contact with them 5 years ago. We thought we thought you had. Killed them? Maya stood up and looked at her gently. We've never attacked your people. We've barely even met your people. These flowers are literally the closest we've ever come to civilization. Touched one of the glowing petals with a trembling finger. The flower responded to her touch, brightening slightly and releasing more of its musical scent. But the stories, everyone knows what humans do to other species. What do the stories say we do? You conquer worlds, you destroy cities, you take slaves and kill anyone who resists you. Maya was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was very soft. Some of those stories might be true from a certain point of view, but not in the way you think. She led to a bench beside a small pond where tiny fish swam in lazy circles. The water reflected the blue light from the night blooms, creating patterns that shifted and danced. It's true that we move into territories where other species live, Maya said, but we don't take them over, we protect them. The galaxy is a dangerous place. There are empires out there that really do conquer and enslave. There are natural disasters that can destroy entire star systems. When we conquer a world, what we're really doing is building defenses around it. I do not understand. Let me tell you about the system. Beautiful world, 3 billion inhabitants, very advanced culture. 5 years ago, their sun started showing signs of instability. In another 20 years, it was going to go nova and kill everyone in the system. Maya pointed to a section of the garden, where golden flowers grew in perfect geometric patterns. Those are memory flowers. Their entire civilization used to tend gardens just like this one, creating living art that could last for centuries. When we detected the solar instability, we sent a fleet to evacuate the entire population. All 3 billion of them. You saved them. We saved their people, their culture, their art, and as many of their plants and animals as we could carry. They're living on New now, a world we terraformed specifically for them. The government officially lists humanity as the conquerors of their original system, because that's how the paperwork has to read. But what really happened was the largest rescue operation in galactic history. Looked around the garden with new eyes. These were not the trophies of conquered peoples. They were memories, carefully preserved and lovingly maintained. Each plant represented a world saved, a culture protected, a species given a second chance. The second chances, she said, understanding the name of the ship for the first time. Now you're starting to see, Maya said with a smile. Over the next few days, found herself spending more and more time with Captain and her crew. What had started as medical recovery had become something much more interesting. An education about the galaxy that completely changed everything she thought she knew. Maya had given her access to the ship's historical records, but more importantly, she had introduced her to crew members from different species who could tell their own stories. Each conversation revealed another piece of the puzzle that was human civilization. Tell her about the concordance, Maya suggested during one of their regular talks in the garden. They were sitting beside the night blooms again, which had become's favorite spot on the ship. Doctor, who had joined them for lunch, made a face like someone tasting something bitter. The Machine Empire. They're probably the worst threat the galaxy has ever seen. Machine Empire. Had never heard of such a thing. Artificial intelligences that decided organic life was inefficient, Maya explained. They started in the far rim about 50 years ago, converting entire star systems into factory worlds. Any biological life they encountered was either eliminated or processed into raw materials. Doctor nodded grimly. They're completely logical and completely merciless. They don't negotiate, they don't show mercy, and they never stop expanding. When they encounter a world with organic life, they calculate the most efficient way to harvest all useful materials and then implement that plan. We've been fighting them for 30 years, Maya continued. Not fighting to conquer them or take their territory, but fighting to protect every organic species they threaten. It's the largest military operation humanity has ever undertaken. Tried to imagine machines that wanted to destroy all life. It was like something from a nightmare. Are you winning? We're holding them back, Maya said. But it costs us tremendously. Every ship we lose fighting the Concordance is a ship we can't use for rescue operations. Every person who dies protecting others is someone who can't help build new colonies for refugee populations. The conversation continued with other crew members adding their own experiences. The engineer told her about how humans had defended his when the Concordance attacked. Commander described evacuation operations that lasted for months, moving entire populations to safety, while human ships held defensive lines against overwhelming odds. We don't always win, Maya admitted honestly. Sometimes we arrive too late or the threat is too large for us to handle, but we try to save everyone we can, regardless of what species they are or whether they can offer us anything in return. That evening, Maya took to the ship's observation deck to show her something special. Through the large windows, she could see another ship keeping pace with the second chances. This one was larger and clearly more advanced, with sleek lines that suggested it was built for speed. That's the promise of tomorrow, Maya said. Design, but with some human modifications for long-range operations. Stared at the ship in amazement. That is one of our ships, but how do you have it? We found it drifting in the Helix Nebula 2 years ago. The crew had died from some kind of radiation poisoning, but the ship was still intact. We studied the design and learned a lot from it. Your people are incredible engineers. You could have kept it for yourselves. We could have, Maya agreed. But it doesn't belong to us. We've been looking for a way to return it to your people ever since we found it. The problem is that no one knows how to contact the government, and your people avoid our space so carefully that we never get a chance to try. Maya activated a wall display that showed the modified ship's interior. Human and design elements were blended together in ways that somehow looked both practical and beautiful. We had to make some modifications to keep it running with our maintenance systems, but the core design is still yours. We even found some personal items belonging to the original crew, and we've kept them safe. You modified it to work better, but you still plan to give it back. Of course. The only reason we've been using it at all is because it's too valuable to just leave floating in space. The moment we find a way to contact your people, this ship goes home. Was quiet for a long time, watching the beautiful hybrid vessel keeping pace with them through the stars. Everything the humans had told her went against everything she had been taught, but the evidence was right in front of her eyes. Maya, she said finally, why do other species think humans are dangerous? Maya leaned against the window, her reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. Because we are dangerous. That part of the stories is true. But you said... I said we're not conquerors or destroyers, but we are predators and we are warriors. We evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill everything else. We learned to fight before we learned to think. We built weapons before we built art. Maya turned away from the window to look directly at her. The difference is what we choose to do with those abilities now. Yes, we're good at killing things. Yes, we're excellent at breaking things that need to be broken. But we decided a long time ago that we wanted to use those skills to protect life instead of destroying it. When did you decide that? When we almost destroyed ourselves, Maya said quietly. About 200 years ago, we fought a war on Our that nearly ended our entire species. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, chemical attacks. We used every terrible thing we could think of against each other. Doctor had joined them on the observation deck and heard the last part of the conversation. "The great dying," she said solemnly. "We lost 90% of our population in less than 10 years. But we survived," Maya continued. "And when the survivors looked around at what we had done to ourselves and our world, we made a choice. We could continue being destroyers, or we could learn to be builders instead." "It wasn't easy," Doctor added. "It took us almost 50 years to rebuild our civilization, and another 50 to develop the technology we needed to leave our solar system. But during that time, we completely changed how we thought about strength and power." Maya gestured toward the hybrid ship floating beside them. "We learned that real strength isn't about being able to destroy your enemies. Real strength is being able to protect your friends. We still have all the same predatory instincts, all the same capacity for violence. But now, we use those traits in service of life instead of death. That is why you fight the machine empire. That's why we fight anyone who threatens innocent people," Maya confirmed. "The concordance, the hegemony of the Star Devourers, we've stood against every major threat to galactic civilization in the last century. Not because we want to rule the galaxy ourselves, but because we refuse to let others be destroyed the way we almost destroyed ourselves." Looked out at the stars, trying to process everything she had learned. Her people had been wrong about humans, but not completely wrong. Humans really were dangerous predators who had conquered there through violence. The difference was what they had chosen to become afterward. "The stories about human expansion," she said slowly, "those are true too." "In a way," Maya nodded. "But we're not expanding to take territory. We're expanding to build a network of protection that covers as much of the galaxy as possible. Every human colony is also a rescue station, a defensive position, and a sanctuary for refugees. And every species we make contact with gets the same offer," Doctor added. "Join the network if you want to, maintain your independence if you prefer, or just let us know if you ever need help. The only thing we ask for in return is that you don't attack innocent people." "What happens if they say no to everything?" Maya shrugged. "Then we leave them alone and hope they never need our help. We're not in the business of forcing anyone to accept our protection." Touched the case containing her research data, which she still carried everywhere. Inside were 5 years of observations about stellar formation, including data that could help her people identify new star systems suitable for colonization. "What if I wanted to share my research with your scientists?" she asked. Both humans smiled. "Then we would be honored to learn from you," Maya said. "And in return, we would share everything we know about stellar cartography, defensive placement, and refugee resettlement. Your people are much better mathematicians than we are. I'm sure you could improve our methods considerably. But first," Doctor added gently, "we need to get you home safely so you can tell your people what you've learned here." Looked out at the stars again, but this time they looked different. Instead of cold, empty space filled with hidden threats, she saw a galaxy where entire civilizations worked together to protect and preserve life, where the most dangerous species had chosen to become guardians instead of destroyers. She was beginning to understand that going home was going to be much more complicated than she had expected. The alarms on the second chances woke everyone at once. Sat up quickly in her quarters, her heart racing as the red emergency lights flashed in the corridors outside. She had been living on the human ship for 2 weeks now, and this was the first time she had heard those particular sounds. Maya's voice came over the communication system, calm but serious. "All crew to stations. We have multiple ships approaching at high speed. Doctor, please escort our guests to the bridge." When reached the bridge a few minutes later, she could see the approaching ships on the main display. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the elegant, crystal-like designs that could only belong to her own people. 5 warships, reported Jin from his navigation station. They're demanding that we release their citizen immediately and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Maya looked at with concern in her eyes. I'm guessing they're here for you. They think you captured me, said, understanding the situation immediately. My distress signal must have been detected by a patrol ship. They probably think I'm being held prisoner. What do you want to do? Maya asked. We can transfer you to their ships right now if that's what you prefer. You're not a prisoner here, you never were. Looked around the bridge at the humans and aliens working together, then at the display showing her people's ships. The vessels were beautiful, but they looked so small and fragile compared to what she now knew was waiting out there in the galaxy. How could her people possibly defend themselves against the Concordance or any of the other threats Maya had described? Open a communication channel, she said suddenly. I want to talk to them. Maya nodded to her communications officer. A moment later, the display showed the bridge of the lead ship. Commander appeared on screen, his pale features tight with worry and anger. Citizen, he said in their musical language, are you hurt? Have they harmed you in any way? We are here to bring you home safely. Commander, I am perfectly safe, replied. These humans saved my life when my ship was destroyed. They have treated me with kindness and respect. You are clearly under duress, said firmly. No human can be trusted. We know what they do to other species. Please confirm your status so we can begin rescue procedures. Took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything, not just for her but possibly for both their species. Commander, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Everything we have been taught about humans is wrong. The silence on the bridge was complete. His large, dark eyes grew even larger as he stared at her through the communication link. That is impossible, he said finally. The records are clear, the testimony from survivors. The survivors never stayed long enough to learn the truth, interrupted. I have been living among humans for 2 weeks. I have seen their ships, talked to their crews, learned about what they really do out here. Commander, they are not conquerors. They are protectors. She spent the next 20 minutes explaining everything she had discovered. The rescue operations, the refugee settlements, the war against the machine empire, the Garden of Memories with its carefully preserved plants from dozens of worlds. And his crew listened with expressions of growing amazement and disbelief. Even if what you say is true, said when she finished, you have been away from your people for weeks. You could be suffering from some kind of mental influence. Then let me prove it to you, said. She looked at Maya, who nodded encouragingly. Captain, would you be willing to allow a small delegation from Commander's ship to tour the second chances? Let them see the gardens, meet the crew, examine the records. Of course, Maya said immediately. They're welcome to inspect anything they want and talk to anyone on the ship. We have nothing to hide. 2 hours later, found herself walking through the Garden of Memories again, but this time she was not alone. Commander and 2 other officers walked beside her, their expressions showing the same amazement she had felt when she first saw this place. They had spent the previous hour touring the rest of the ship, meeting crew members from different species, and examining the historical records that documented decades of human rescue operations. Now they stood in front of the glowing night blooms, breathing the familiar scent of home. These flowers died out on Nexus Station 5 years ago, said Doctor, one of science officers. We assumed the entire research project had been lost. The humans found the station and saved what they could, explained. They have been caring for these plants ever since, hopping to find a way to return them to our people. Reached out to touch one of the glowing petals, and the flower brightened in response to his presence. This changes everything, he said quietly. If humans really are protectors rather than predators, then our people have been hiding from our greatest potential allies, finished. Commander, I want to show you something. She led them to a quiet corner of the garden where Maya had set up a small workspace with human and equipment working together. Her research data was displayed on screens that showed the stellar formation patterns she had been studying. Captain introduced me to their head of stellar sciences, explained. Dr. Williams has been working on similar research but from a completely different angle when we combined our approaches. The display showed star maps that revealed potential colony sites with a precision that neither species could have achieved alone. Mathematical models had been enhanced by human observational data to identify star systems that would remain stable for millions of years. This is remarkable, Dr. breathed. The precision level is beyond anything we have accomplished independently. And this is just the beginning, said. Imagine what we could discover if our peoples worked together fully. The humans have been fighting threats that could destroy us without our ever knowing they existed. We have mathematical and scientific knowledge that could make their protection efforts far more effective. Commander was quiet for a long moment, studying the star maps and the research data. Finally, he looked at with an expression she had never seen before, hope mixed with determination. Citizen, are you formally requesting that I open diplomatic contact between our peoples? I am, Commander, and I volunteer to serve as liaison between our species if the Council approves. That evening, representatives from both species gathered in the Second Chance's main conference room for the first official diplomatic meeting between humans and in galactic history. Maya and signed preliminary agreements for scientific cooperation, information sharing, and mutual aid. But the real celebration happened in the Garden of Memories, where human children from the ship's families were learning about stellar formation while officers shared mathematical techniques with Dr. Williams and his team. Sat on a bench surrounded by youngsters from several different species, all listening with wide eyes as she explained how new stars were born from clouds of gas and dust. Behind her, the night blooms glowed softly in their carefully maintained garden bed, their light mixing with the laughter of children and the excited conversation of scientists sharing discoveries. And that is how a star begins to shine, she concluded, gesturing toward the display showing a stellar nursery billions of light years away. Will we be able to visit new stars? Asked a small human girl with bright, curious eyes. Perhaps someday, said with a smile. If your people and mine work together, we might be able to find wonderful new worlds around young stars where children like you can explore safely. Maya appeared beside the group, carrying a steaming cup of tea that smelled like the night blooms. How are our first students doing? She asked. They ask excellent questions, said, accepting the tea gratefully, very much like young scientists should. Speaking of young scientists, Maya said, Dr. Williams wanted me to tell you that the Council of Sciences has approved the joint research proposal. You'll have access to the full human stellar database, and we'll have access to your mathematical models. He thinks we can identify at least 50 new suitable colony sites within the next year. Looked around the garden, at the children from different worlds learning together, at the plants that represented dozens of saved civilizations, at the humans and already working side by side. 6 weeks ago, she had been a lone researcher expecting to die in the cold emptiness between stars. Now she was part of something larger than she had ever imagined possible. Captain, she said formally, on behalf of my people, I want to thank you for showing us that the galaxy is not as dark and dangerous as we believed. Maya smiled and raised her own cup in a small salute. On behalf of my people, I want to thank you for showing us that the galaxy is far more beautiful and full of potential than we ever hoped. Outside the windows, human and ships traveled together toward the next star system, carrying the seeds of a new alliance between species who had once feared each other, but had chosen instead to reach for the stars together. And in the Garden of Memories, night blooms from a distant world glowed softly in the artificial starlight, their gentle radiance reflecting off the faces of children who would grow up in a galaxy where cooperation had replaced fear, where protection had replaced conquest, and where the most dangerous species in known space had chosen to become guardians of everyone else's dreams.